Thanks for joining us this afternoon, America. I'm John Stubbins, your host here for Indivisible. And today I want to discuss the lockdown with coronavirus and some of the ramifications of that, of the lockdown, the shutdown. As you know, people have been, getting arrested. And mainly we're hearing that come from the faith-based community for people holding church services and for people that are doing things in cities where the governor says you can't do it or the mayor says that you can't do it. So, abortion's okay. Those can run on tap. No problems. You can go to Walmart, no problem. You go to a gun store, no problem. But if you hold a church service, you're in trouble. So for some reason, I don't understand that, especially when church services that are being held are practicing social distancing safely and doing so in a time where God-fearing people need their church more than ever. I want to bring on today a pastor in Louisiana. His name is Tony Spell, who has been arrested 28 times for violating the governor's order in Louisiana for holding church services in spite of this order, this executive order by this governor in Louisiana. And also I want to bring on his attorney, Judge Roy Moore. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
It's nice to be with you.
Thank you for having us on today. It's an honor to be with you.
My pleasure. I want to expose this and get this out to the American people so they know what's going on. Can you tell us, guys, number one, what is the governor's name there in Louisiana? One more time.
Governor John
Bell Edwards. He issued an executive order stating that we should not have church services. Of course, we had services from the time that he said do not have them, and we've continued to have them. We're actually at 31 misdemeanor summons that carry with them 6 months in jail. And after the governor lifted his ban of no church services, he went to 25% capacity, and we've actually exceeded his 25% for 6 times now. So we are surveilled. We're persecuted for righteousness' sake. We are followed everywhere we go. There's cameras all around our property, not for crimes, but for simply obeying our God-given command to have church services in person. That's all we're guilty of.
You're guilty of doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is following the Lord's example and sharing that with your congregation. God bless you, Pastor Spell, for doing what you're doing. Judge Moore, what's going on legally with this case? And also, my second question, have there been any members of the congregation that have been cited or are being followed or surveilled?
Well, I think they've had cameras in the past outside the pastor's church, and of course they view the congregation going in and out, and it makes congregants quite uneasy, as you can well understand. What's going on legally? We've gone into federal court and we're going into state court. There are 2 issues going on. One, we have to deal with the pastor's arrest and summons that are there in the state court. And then the other thing we're dealing with is the violation of constitutional rights and liberties, both under the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Louisiana. And interestingly enough, Louisiana has a very strong Constitution in our favor. The very authority that's given to the governor to issue proclamations and orders is restricted regarding fundamental rights and liberties. And I think that's kind of unique. It's proper. And when he does violate these rights and liberties, then he should be called to task.
Okay. Judge Moore, are there any other parishioners, any other members of the congregation, though, that have been cited, just real quick?
I don't know of any that's been cited, but we
Okay.
do have some that have lost their jobs from different, not necessarily from the government's perspective, but because pressures put on this church and this pastor.
Why? Because they're affiliated with Pastor Spell?
That's right.
That is correct.
Okay.
I've had 8 people terminated from their jobs because they refused to stop coming to church. In other words, their employer said, if you go back to church, do not come back to this job. So my members, in no uncertain terms, said, we will go back to church and we will exercise our freedom of religion. Of
Yes.
course, they were terminated, and you cannot draw an employment on a termination. So they're filing with the EEOC, and they're going through the process of their lawsuits right now. So they've been unemployed probably. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is just insane.
Yes.
I got to tell you, to my listeners, to my viewers, think about what we're talking about here. Okay, so you can't go to church in certain places, like down in Louisiana. What's the county, Tony?
This is East Baton Rouge Parish. We're the only state of 50 that have parishes instead of counties.
Right. Yeah. This is East Baton Rouge Parish down in Louisiana. Yeah. Okay. But this is happening all over the country, not just in Louisiana. Yeah. Are there any other churches or pastors that you've talked to, Pastor Spell, that are going through something similar right now that you are?
Nobody in Baton Rouge. Most people have shuttered their doors in Baton Rouge because of the bully tactics and the intimidation of law enforcement, the threat of National Guard, the constant harassment from our political figures. Our governor and our mayor has called my name several times, encouraging people just don't come to my church, which is complete slander.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible.
But, you know, Reverend in Holly Springs, Mississippi, had his church burned down and then graffitied on the asphalt parking lot. I bet you'll stay home from church now. So that's a good friend of mine, Jerry Waldrop in Holly Springs, Mississippi. Right now in San Diego, California, Pastor Joel Buxton, who has gotten a lot of his courage from Baton Rouge, said, we have to go back to church. We can't survive financially. We can't survive spiritually. And he's on the very beginning end of where I've been for 75 days now, of taking harassment from law enforcement and local politicians. So there are other people that are certainly being harassed simply because they say we have to exercise our religious freedoms. We would rather obey God than man.
Yeah.
And of course, there is an antichrist government in America of socialistic, Marxist, communistic tyrants who want to shut our doors, and we refuse to let.
Yes, they're trying to shut the church down. Okay, and it's interesting because this is a freedom of speech issue. This is a constitutional issue. Obviously, having the right to our religion and to worship God. Judge Moore, obviously, you know this. This is a right, a constitutional right. Okay. And we're experiencing problems across the nation with people being able to worship God. Okay, this is a big problem, and we're not going to tolerate this.
Well, it's a clear violation of separation of church and state. For many years, the liberals have argued the separation of church and state means that you can't acknowledge God in our government. Well, that's completely wrong. It's the wrong aspects of separation of church and state that don't exist. God ordained both the church and the state, and he ordained those jurisdictions and they were kept separate. Madison said in his memorial and remonstrance that we maintain, therefore, that in matters of religion, no man's right is abridged by the institution of civil society, and that religion is wholly exempt from civil society.
Yes.
In other words, you can't come in and shut down the church. And the assembly is part of the church. It's something that's a basic doctrine of the church. That's where the word ecclesiastes come from, the church. And basically, it's the First Amendment right to religious freedom, and it's First Amendment right to assembly, both of which are encompassed in the Louisiana Constitution and most constitutions of the country. And in this particular instance, the governor has issued a proclamation, a resolution, an order, what do you want to call it, to take away those rights. When the Louisiana statute that gives him authority said he was excluded from that particular jurisdiction.
Yeah. Listen, we know that there is a grander design. And by the way, I'm hearing a noise. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's kind of interfering with the interview. Somebody might have their mic turned on. I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, there's a grander design by the left to take out Christianity in this country. We know that. Pastor Spell, please speak to that.
Mm-hmm. I'm getting extreme interference here, but that's nothing new for us. Our phones are tapped and they take down our share buttons on all of our feeds of our videos. So I'm used to the scrambling on my end. I'll tell you this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator. Our inalienable rights to go to church and preach the gospel do not come from our governor, our mayor, or law enforcement. They come from our creator.
Yes.
And I can't give up those rights.
No.
We refuse to give up those rights. And if this is such a deadly virus, then why, after 75 days of not stopping, shaking hands, hugging necks, baptizing people, laying hands on people, praying for everyone, why is not half of my congregation deceased? Not one death associated with our church.
Praise God. Praise God.
And, you know, we have 9,800 people who hold letters in our church. We have about 1,200 people in average attendance every Sunday morning. And then we have Sunday nights and Tuesday nights running buses. So we're going to find out very quickly that this was the biggest politically motivated hoax to ever come against the United States of America.
Yeah.
In 1918, the influence in the world. We never shut churches for swine flu. We're going to shut down our churches in 2020 and stop assembly in 2020 for a disease or a virus that's not as deadly as influenza. I'll tell you this, in the past 75 days, 3,100 babies have been murdered in Louisiana's 3 Planned Parenthood clinics. 2,600 people have died of COVID-19. And we know that not all of those 2,600 deaths were legitimate, because they said someone connected with us died of COVID-19. And we know for a fact that that individual did not have the virus. So there's a lot of falsehoods that are being spread in America, and people are being deceived in wholesale numbers right now. The spirit of deception is on us, and our brethren, even our religious leaders in America, they have actually bought into the myth that they should obey the governor and stay home from church.
Yeah.
And this is why in any given service, I will have 15 or 17 different states represented in one of my church services, because people are craving to get back to church and worship God. And we're one of the last churches in America doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, praise God. I'm glad that you are, first off. Second off, you remember the H1N1. I heard you cut out, but I heard you just kind of just reference that. The H1N1 virus, when Obama and Biden were in office. You notice how we didn't shut the country down? You notice how we didn't shut churches down during that virus. Okay, we had zero problems keeping the country open during that time. Now, all of a sudden, with this virus, everything had to shut down. And I don't understand it.
I think, John, that part of it's just a political process. I think
Yes.
it moved in with politics. They're attempting to shut down the upcoming election. I think this has gone on throughout our history. We've had viruses, swine flus, we had smallpox, cholera epidemic. Cholera epidemic in 1849 killed 150,000 people in our country. And at that time, Zachary Taylor issued an order that people should forsake their secular occupations and assemble in church to pray for divine intervention. We've got to understand that what's going on here is against the law, not only against the law, it's against our faith, and it's against the history of our country. We've never shut down, and there's no reason this should be shut down. That's why we're pursuing this in federal court, and we'll proceed on to the Fifth Circuit, which is in Texas, with this case.
What do you perceive happening with the case, Judge?
I think we will, no matter what happens in the future, we're going to continue this case because Pastor Spell has suffered damages. He's suffered injuries. He's been put under house arrest. He's had an ankle bracelet attached to his ankles to prevent him from leaving his house and to stop him preaching to his congregation. It's not just about the assembly. It's about preaching, doing the job as a pastor. He's been prevented from other things besides preaching. He has other duties at the church, as you well know, and he's been stopped. Now, the ankle bracelets have been taken off. We've gone to federal court, and shortly thereafter, they were taken off. But we're not finished yet. We're going to keep pressing this issue because it's wrong, not just for Pastor Spell. It's wrong for the entire country.
That's right.
Let's leaders stand up like Pastor Spell. We're going to lose our right, one of the most precious rights our forefathers fought and died for. And Pastor Spell was correct. And I was about to bring that out. This is a constitutional right, but it's a constitutional right based on the organic law, Declaration of Independence, which says that God gave us these rights. They're inalienable rights.
That's right.
From us, and you can't give them up. So what's happening now is, I think it's an excuse to move in on the church. And you've seen certain governors, and I can name them if you wish, in Virginia, for one, and different places. They're doing it all over the country. But John Bell Edwards is another. And they're moving in to try to stop the worship. This is the most central fact of our faith, that where Jesus said, where two or three are gathered together, there I am. And he taught in the temple. His disciples and apostles taught in the temple. And that's where the church gathers, because they like Pastor Spell said, lay hands on each other. They heal, the sacraments. It all deals with assembly. And if you can't assemble, you have the church that will be scattered.
This thing really bothers me. Like I said, we're seeing this across the country in different spots. It's inexcusable. We're not going to tolerate it. Okay. We're going to call it out, and we're going to call it out daily, over and over again. And Pastor Spell, I want to make sure that you keep us informed on your case, and that you'll definitely be coming back on to update us on where the case stands. You and Judge Moore.
Right.
And I want to say, I would be proud to be a member of your church. Number one. Okay. Number one.
Thank you.
Number two, I also want to add something else. And I think that you'll love this. We want to do something very special for you. I am partners with Mark Cook. We have a men's ministry called The First Hour for Men. And we're going to be coming down to Louisiana in July. We would like to come by your church, and we would like to bring copies of The First Hour for Men for the men of your congregation to to bring into your community and help heal the man and heal the family and make our country truly great again by bringing them closer to God and doing that in that form. And I'll send you a copy of this 30-day challenge. It's not really a book; it's more of a checklist. You have to use the Bible to complete this book. But I want to make sure that we bless you and your congregation for this nonsense. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Pastor.
That would be a high privilege and honor. When there's so much persecution and Judge, that I've had to log back on about a dozen times during this interview because somebody's interferes. I can't hardly stay on the phone more than 2 minutes. And I have 3 phones right now that I communicate with because of this problem. We can't keep our feeds up. So hear much of what I said. I'd be honored to have you here. My men and all churches have been in the trenches for 75 days. They're battle worn. They're ostracized by their friends and their families because they refuse to stop coming to church. So any support would be very appreciated.
Yes.
On our church. And it was a pleasure being on here with y'all today. Like I said, I can't hardly see or hear what's going on because of the interference and what's being done to my phone. But I was glad to be here with you.
Yeah, just so you know, Pastor, we're getting interference from your connection, I think, right now. So they're probably trying to scramble you right now during this interview, just so you know. Okay? And that's fine.
That's right.
Because we're going to defeat them. And if they don't like it, that's just too bad. Okay? Because I'm going to call it out. Judge, do you have any closing comments?
Well, just I appreciate Pastor Spell as a man, as a courageous pastor, for standing up for his rights. So many have caved, and I think it's so wrong. When you think of the millions of people who've died for our religious heritage over the centuries, not just in our country, but in other countries, in Europe, that this fight is one that's been fought for years and years. And now we see, in my opinion, a political interference with the church with an excuse of a coronavirus. We've had coronaviruses for many, many years. All flus are coronaviruses. And we've had cholera and smallpox. We've never closed the churches, and we don't need to close the churches now.
Well, first of all, thank you, Judge, for coming on. I know that you're representing Pastor Spell, and I want to thank again Pastor Spell for having the courage to do what he does, to stand up for God, to stand up for the Constitution, and I'm proud to have you both on the program today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for joining us today on Indivisible. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.